Compared to Finland, Ukraine's situation is truly tragic. Both countries border Russia. Both sought to join NATO. Yet in 2023, when Finland officially joined NATO, it didn't face a Russian invasion. Why is that? If history could be rewritten, if Ukraine had another chance, could it have become another Finland? Let's dive into the story. Many have said Finland was able to join NATO thanks to Ukraine's suffering. But in my view, one key reason why Russia didn't invade Finland is Finland's internal unity, something Ukraine has never truly had. Despite sharing a long border with Russia, Finland has almost no Russian ethnic population and virtually no pro-Russian political forces. That allowed Finland to make a nationwide decision to join NATO with near total public support. The process was swift and seamless, so fast, in fact, that Russia didn't even have time to draft military plans or deploy troops. It simply missed the chance to launch any kind of special military operation. So why is Finland so united in its stance against Russia? In a word, hatred. Historical hatred towards Tsarist Russia, Soviet Russia, and modern-day Russia. Let's trace this back. Finland was once part of the Kingdom of Sweden for 560 years. In 1809, it was ceded to the Russian Empire after a war. However, Finland was incorporated as a Grand Duchy, not a typical province. It recognized the Russian Tsar as its ruler, but didn't see itself as part of the Russian state. During this time, Finland enjoyed a high degree of autonomy. It kept most of its tax revenue and maintained its own cultural and educational systems. Russian settlers didn't migrate en masse into Finland. This autonomy and cultural independence allowed Finland to retain a strong national identity, even under Russian rule. Then in 1917, when the Russian Empire collapsed and the Tsar was overthrown, Finland declared independence. The early Soviet government was too weak to reclaim all former imperial territories, so in 1922, the Soviet Union officially signed peace treaties with Finland and several other neighboring countries. But the peace didn't last. In 1939, the Soviets signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact with Nazi Germany. The two powers secretly divided Eastern Europe between them. When Germany invaded Poland, the Soviets quickly seized the eastern half. Then, they turned to Finland and demanded territory. Finland refused, and the Winter War broke out. To the world's surprise, Finnish forces put up fierce resistance. They inflicted heavy losses on the Soviet military. In the end, Finland was outgunned and forced to concede over 40,000 square kilometers of territory. But Stalin, wary of committing too many resources, decided not to launch a full-scale invasion. This war left a deep impression on the Russians. They realized Finland was not to be underestimated. Still, Finland never forgot the land it had lost. When Hitler invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, Finland saw a chance to strike back. It cooperated with Germany and reclaimed its territory. But Finland didn't follow Germany deeper into Soviet territory. That restraint later saved it from total destruction. After World War II, Finland again had to give up the territory it had reclaimed, plus its only Arctic seaport and several other strategic areas. Stalin decided that was enough and chose not to wipe Finland off the map. Since then, Finland embraced neutrality. It understood its delicate position between NATO and the Soviet Union. That history of invasion, war, and loss shaped the Finnish mindset. Their current president, Alexander Stubb, recently warned Ukraine not to make territorial concessions to Russia, saying Finland had made that mistake once and would never do it again, and declared that Finland does not recognize any Ukrainian territory annexed by Russia. When the Ukraine war broke out, Finland's anti-Russian stance became even clearer. It quickly applied to join NATO, welcomed NATO troops to its borders, and positioned itself as a frontline state against Russia, perhaps even more aggressively than Poland or the Baltic states. Meanwhile, Russia doesn't seem to have forgotten Finland either. According to reports, Moscow is expanding military bases near the Finnish border. NATO intelligence believes Russia is preparing for a potential future conflict, with plans to grow its military to 1.5 million troops. So again, Why didn't Russia invade Finland when it joined NATO? Russia's stated reason for invading Ukraine was that NATO expansion threatened its national security. But Finland's border with Russia is even longer than Ukraine's, and it's right next to St. Petersburg, one of Russia's most important cities. If security were the only issue, Finland would be the bigger threat. The truth is, Russia lacked the capability. First, Finland's proximity to St. Petersburg made any war extremely risky. Russia couldn't afford to let its second-largest city become a battleground. Second, Finland chose its timing wisely. It applied to join NATO just as the Ukraine war reached a stalemate. Russia was already stretched thin and simply couldn't open a second front. And finally, the scars from the Winter War still linger. Russia knows that fighting Finland would be costly and unpredictable, something it cannot afford right now. And so, we come back to the question, if Ukraine had another chance, could it have become another Finland? In my opinion, it would be extremely difficult. Even if Ukraine had tried to stay neutral, external powers would still push it toward choosing between Russia and the West. Geography and history made that choice inevitable. Unlike Finland, Ukraine has always struggled with internal unity. Ukrainians, Russians, and Belarusians share the same East Slavic roots. Their ancestors built the powerful Kievan Rus, a medieval state that once dominated Eastern Europe. But after the Mongol invasions, the region fractured. Western Ukraine came under Polish-Lithuanian rule, while the East remained with local Cossacks, essentially free Slavic warriors without a homeland. Over time, Western Ukrainians were influenced by Catholicism, while the East held onto Eastern Orthodoxy. These religious and cultural divides weakened national identity. Later, Tsarist Russia annexed much of Ukraine and tried to impose Russification. But oppression only fueled separatist sentiment. During the Soviet era, Stalin's policies led to a devastating famine in the 1930s, killing millions. The trauma further widened the divide between Ukrainians and Russians. After gaining independence in 1991, Ukraine enjoyed some prosperity thanks to its Soviet inheritance. But without strong governance or experience in nation-building, it struggled. As Russia's influence declined, Ukraine began leaning toward NATO and the EU. That drew increasing attention and pressure from both East and West. You can criticize Ukraine for playing both sides, but its desire for peace was genuine. It even gave up its nuclear arsenal in exchange for security guarantees from Russia and the West. Those guarantees, however, turned out to be empty promises. Ukraine looked to the Russian-led security bloc but found little support, especially after the Yugoslav wars exposed Moscow's weaknesses. So it turned to the West. But Russia, regaining strength, reacted aggressively. The 2008 war in Georgia, the 2014 annexation of Crimea, these were warnings. Ukraine tried to tread carefully, but the pressures were too great. In the end, Ukraine was pushed into conflict, and that's why it could never become another Finland. Once again, history and geography shaped its fate. Thanks for watching. What do you think of the reasons why Russia didn't invade Finland? Share your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next video.